I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we're meeting, the Turrbal and Yuggera people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to recognise that this has always been a site of learning. My name's Martin Mills, and I'm really thrilled to be introducing this Radford lecture for two reasons. The first is that it's the Radford lecture, and there's just a few words about William Radford, who was a significant education academic in Australia. He was a high school teacher who became the director of ACER, the Australian Council for Educational Research. He got his PhD at a very good university in London in 1954. He was president of AARE in 1974 and was also a foundation member of AARE. For me, there's a certain significance in relation to Radford. He did a major review of the assessment system in Queensland, and I arrived from England into that system in the early 70s, in the very year that they got rid of external exams in Queensland. It was what I would consider both an inspired and inspiring moment, I think, in Queensland educational history. Talking of inspired and inspiring, it brings me to introduce the next speaker, Professor Peter Renshaw. And my second reason for being really thrilled to give this talk is that Peter is a very, very dear friend, and it's lovely to see Peter's family in the audience as well today, so I would like to acknowledge them. Peter, before we came in, said, "Keep it short, please." Peter and I have known each other a long time. We've travelled in different parts of Queensland. We've travelled together internationally. And I have a little kind of metaphorical notebook of Peter Renshawisms. And I think that's what he was scared that I might be opening today. But this is neither the time nor place, I don't think. But happy to chat to people afterwards. Look, there's people can read Peter's biography, incredibly impressive. The people he's worked with many of the people in the room, you know who you are. And I think that all of us who have worked with Peter have really appreciated both the intellect that he brings to our projects that we've worked on, but also his humour and also his commitment to social justice. I think that Peter is one of those people that if you are interested in social justice, committed to social justice, you cannot help but admire Peter Renshaw's work and Peter Renshaw's way of engaging with issues. You never leave any meeting not knowing what Peter thinks. It's one of his dearest qualities. We were at a conference together in New Zealand where we met and heard presentations by the scholar warriors that Tracy was talking about. And one of them quoted, and I've now used this quote, I loved it, Graham Smith, the Maori academic in New Zealand, who says of people working in social justice, "I don't want you to just talk about it, show me the blisters on your hands." And I think that Peter's hands are incredibly calloused from all the blisters, from the work that he's done around social justice. So with great pleasure, I introduce Peter Renshaw to give this year's Radford Lecture. Thanks, Peter.
Hey? Yeah, I was going to stand on it, but of course Martin is significantly shorter than I am. So I would like to acknowledge the custodians and traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Turrbal and Yuggera people, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to pay my respects to all the Indigenous scholars and researchers here today, and particularly to my close colleagues at UQ, Marnie Shea and Tracy Bunda. I'm aware of Tracy's presence down here. It's still strong at the microphone after yesterday, so thanks, Tracy. And I remember saying to her yesterday, well, what do I say now? You know, but it's great to be asked to do the Radford lecture. I remember towards the end of last year I received a letter which I opened, and the first words were something about doing the Radford lecture. And what went through my mind was that moment when Stephen Bradbury won the gold medal in the Winter Olympics some years ago. Some of you may know I had a significant birthday this year, and so I was like the Stephen Bradbury, coming sort of towards the end of the field, and then suddenly everybody fell over in front of me, and there I was. Here I am today, the Radford lecturer. But it is an extremely significant honour, and I don't take it lightly. It's been a constant companion actually for most of the year, and now it's upon me. I wanted to recognise the research, can I say totally solid research, of scholars I've known for ages and who have written about place and pedagogy and critical activist approaches to education. So there's always problems when you start to mention people, and I'll probably leave people out, but I do want to dig myself that particular hole and apologise to anybody that I left out. But some of my dearest friends and long-term colleagues, Joanne Reid and Bill Green, Barbara Comer, who's not here, Murray Brennan, Lou Zippin, and the work of Margaret Somerville, which I've really benefited from. And I want to mention recently some other scholars whose work I've come across recently that I think is fantastic. Amy Cutter-McKenzie, Karen Malone, and their colleagues and students who have been research leaders on the topics and issues that I'm addressing today. I've learned a great deal from their approaches to research and their genuine passion for change and to involve young people as co-researchers. So I want to thank all of those people. I think I've got to stop saying thank you because the next 3 hours could go on. I mean, next 1 hour could be taken up with thank yous. But of course, I want to thank Martin in particular for his friendship and collegial research collaborations over many years, and to Bob Lingard, one of my older colleagues, whose laughter and banter light up our corridors when he's not somewhere else, which is kind of where he is most of the time. So, where was I? So here's the outline. I may have to skip one of the parts now, but so as you can see, taking on some big ideas at the beginning. Then we want to move to, in part two, to talk about place stories of heart. And it's my pleasure to be able to say that Bernice Volz is here today. I'll be introducing her at that point. And then there's Reshma and Lucy, who are fourth grade kids from Moggle State School, are going to come and tell you about a bug garden that they're developing. Then in part three, I want to look at this issue of Act Now and activism in education and the challenges that that's bringing us. You can see some thanks here to Ron Tooth and the team at Pullen Vale Environmental Ed Centre. So I've been working with them for many years now, actually, and they've been an inspiration and very much central to the research and the projects that I'm reporting today. I would also like to thank Dr. Kim Davies, who's not here, but she was a dialogic partner with me on various drafts of this presentation over the past few weeks. So I want to begin by thinking about place. So I'm theorising place as stories. So Doreen Massey wrote tellingly about place as unfinished stories. So Massey's phrase captures the relational and open-ended nature of place per se, and the sense that any place has many possible stories. And most importantly, many emerging stories that are being created in the present. So here's a photo of one such place story to contemplate. I want you to take a close look. We participate in co-authoring place for better and worse. So when I say we here, I mean a new we, an extended notion of an entangled collective process involving other living and non-living entities, But however we conceptualise we, there are no alibis. We are answerable for these place stories. So just some thoughts on this image here. What's the black stuff? Is it seaweed? Is it oil? It's ashes. They seem out of place. How did these ashes get here? What are the man and dog thinking and feeling? What can the dog smell in the ashes? Perhaps the remains of other animals consumed by the fire. Maybe koalas or bandicoots or lizards and snakes. As Doreen Massey notes, every place is interconnected with other places. The black ash on the beach is a poignant testament to this. There's melancholy and loss here. It's materially present as this place is continually remade in interaction with other places. In this case, interaction with the fires that ravage parts of the Sunshine Coast in recent weeks and months. There's deep feeling in place. There's deep knowledge in place. Feelings and knowledges created by multiple authors across time. Consider the generations of Indigenous people who walked on the beach and left traces of their lives. Consider the journey of the grains of sand through deep time and the multiple times each grain might have been part of a coral or other living entity. But they are here right now, on this beach, in between the paws and toes of these local residents, entering into a new relationship. Our encounters in the present are also with deep time and the multiple inhabitants of those time places. I like to think we are in motion with place, a metaphor of entwinement, dancing place, places dancing us, and who knows where this spinning might take us. Yes, who knows where. So, we have to ask the question, how will future generations work with the place stories we are spinning now? How will they be able to make, what will they be able to make of and with these place stories? The story places of the current era are forming the Anthropocene. The era could be regarded as the outcome of human activity, a kind of planetary inevitability coinciding with the emergence of Homo sapiens. But that is a deterministic and simplistic take on the stories of the here and now. That authorship of the Anthropocene is conceived as objective, with no responsibility, with no answerability. But the Anthropocene needs to be read as an accountable story. There are no alibis in the Anthropocene stories, no inevitabilities. It is answerable. As Donna Haraway reminds us, the Anthropocene is not a species act of Homo sapiens. It's a story of colonialism and a patriarchal story and a capitalist story that has involved the prolonged exploitation of cheap nature and cheap labour and the oppression of Indigenous peoples across the world in order to acquire their land for monocultural plantations and enforced labour. And it continues as we sit here today. Haraway, in fact, rejects the term the Anthropocene and plays with other terms to highlight the systemic, historical and social processes that are producing the current place stories. So you can see those different names that she plays with. Each of those names foregrounds a particular focus for analysis, but all are interconnected, all are merging into a system that we call the Anthropocene. She also speculates about an alternative present and future, the Thulacene, a time-place where there is capacity to make kin in assemblages that include the more than human, the other than human, the inhuman, the human as humus. Yes, we are all composting entities. And I know some of my grandchildren are here and they're greatly enjoying that idea. They like crossing boundaries of bourgeois sensibility. I think they're more ready than we may think to make kin with composting beings and the messiness of this living world, including composting grandpas, perhaps. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. Thank you. So here we see a student with her sign at the 15th of March climate strike on the Gold Coast. I took the photo. She told me that she's the only student from her school of about 2,000 students. So that's an interesting story in itself. Her sign tells exactly where we are and where we're going in terms of global warming. Her sign suggests that she understands something, that some story places are produced to maintain hegemonic relationships that preserve the interests of those in power. In this case, she's calling out the government and its local representative, whose office is in the building behind her, regarding their failure to address climate change and carbon emissions. She is advocating a different place story, where governments are made to feel uncomfortable when their policies are revealed to have catastrophic consequences. In this case, right here in the Gold Coast in the not too distant future. So this student seems to know something crucial. She's asking whose interests are being served by these powerful and catastrophic place stories that are forming the here and now. And she wants an alternative. These are signs from the recent strike in Brisbane, the stories of terror and lost hope. So what are the place stories being spun into and out of existence now? The signs suggest it is places of lost hope and people who are terrified because they understand and will not deny the evidence on carbon and global warming, and they care about the consequences. The march in September was a place story of solidarity and resistance and public pedagogy. It was organised and led by young people, school students inspired by Greta. They were, in effect, calling us older generations to account. There's no alibis in our place stories, in the mess that we've helped to make. In Brisbane, masses of people in high-rise business offices and at public transport hubs stopped to watch and listen. The march was led out from Victoria Place by Indigenous students and members of their communities who asserted their sovereignty over the land as we walked. We chanted in solidarity with them, always was, always will be, Aboriginal land. And this felt wonderfully transgressive in the very heart of private ownership of land in the city. And then, what do we want? When do we want it? Now! Exactly. So the co-authored story of the march produced a carnivalesque place in the CBD of Brisbane. We took over the streets where cars had ruled and breathed and exhaled and sped by. We ignored blinking traffic lights. We shouted at and with each other. Smiling police guarded our passage and chatted with bystanders. It was a strange feeling to see some of our more radical feminist colleagues don high-vis vests to act as crowd control wardens. Even this visual absurdity added to the liberating carnivalesque tone to the whole march. We very openly expressed our feeling in the public square. We mocked our leaders and paraded their papier-mâché heads to heap scorn. We wanted our shared collective emotions of anger, disbelief and frustration at that moment to mobilise action from other citizens and put pressure on the government. This was our liberating carnivalesque place story. In the background to the We Are Terrified sign is red lettering that summarises the evidence, if you like, the rational voice that justifies our public emotional exclamation, "We are terrified." This rational evidence provided the warrant for our terror, but it's had little effect on policy, thereby adding to our terror and our sense of urgency, because one of the fundamental assumptions of our democracy has been and continues to be flouted. Overwhelming evidence has been denied or ignored in order to maintain the interests of particular groups, mainly the fossil fuel industries, and thereby jeopardise the welfare of the planetary systems that sustain life. Not only is evidence flouted, but our Parliament has been turned into a festival of denial and inaction on meaningful policy initiatives. As Richard Flanagan wrote, "Tasmania is burning. The climate disaster future has arrived while those in power laugh at us. They hold up lumps of coal in front of their throne. They laugh and gloat. Won't hurt you, won't hurt you. They're having their own mocking moment, mocking us who want action. This is actually what Scott Morrison said. This is coal. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared. It's our sustainable energy future. How did we get to this comic and tragic scene? How did we get here? I think within the Western human-centred tradition, man has been cast as the authoritative author, naming and categorising nature, as in the creation story in Genesis where God oversees Adam, naming the animals as they parade by and assuming dominion over them for his own delight and benefit. Managing and subduing nature continues to seduce humankind with its promise of technical fixes to our current precarity. This technological story reassures us. It's meant to comfort us. No need to worry, children, as our PM has recently said. Enjoy your childhood. It's okay because, my words now, expert scientists and technologists and politicians like me have everything in hand to ensure you live comfortably and, to quote our PM again, in a pristine environment. So I'm not sure what pristine means anymore, maybe totally burnt. It's a relief to laugh, isn't it? Yeah. So what do we do or say to this voice of authority? Okay, great, thanks for that. I'll get on. Yeah, no worries. I'll get on with the summer of cricket and barbecues. I think he actually said that recently. Of course, this is exactly the response they want from their preferred kind of Australians. Quiet, distracted, complacent. She'll be right, mate. But can we joke our way through this? Can we be jokey, trusting, politically quiet Australians? Laugh. Yes, we've got to laugh. These students are having great fun, poking fun. Their laughter is transgressive, challenges the quietism promoted by the PM. It is transgressive. On one of the girls' arms, I can't see what it says, but the first word is fuck. Excuse me, children in the audience. When politicians are absurd, when we are terrified, when the evidence is overwhelming, when nothing happens regarding policy, we've no option. We've got to laugh. Carnivalesque laughter is not mere inversion of the status quo. It shatters the official world. That's why it's dangerous to politicians. And it offers opportunity to recreate a new one. To quote from a paper by Michael Bell from 1994, carnivalesque laughter denies, but it revives and renews. It degrades and materialises. This possible new world is the people's world. Carnival points out the egalitarian oneness of material life, an openness to life that connects us all, end quote. So carnivalesque events such as the march are about turning the tables and sustaining oneself in public through collaborative action, a form of renewing solidarity and reinvention. But after the carnivalesque laughter, I think the laughter is temporary, the carnival is over, but the consequences of inaction are still utterly unsettling and awful. Can we ever sing this childhood song again with joy? As Leslie Head notes in her 2015 book, Hope and Grief in the Anthropocene, Reconceptualising Human-Nature Relations, grief and other distressing emotions will be our companions in the Anthropocene. So, we need to. That's a difficult sentence to finish. And I hope my answer is a little clearer at the end of this talk, but I think it entails going on with more determination and will, staying with the trouble, creating play stories with others that are vibrant and engaging and based on an extended and open sense of kinship. I should say that probably that kookaburra is actually feasting, because the burnt ground, the animals there. But it's also like an iconic image of what we've done. So distressing images like these make us aware of the need to change. The distress is not going to go away. So as educators and researchers, we have a clear responsibility to rethink and re-theorise and critically re-examine the assumptions that have produced the current version of the Anthropocene, the Pyrocene. So these are fires from this year. I mean, these are just some of the fires from this year. I'm going to be talking about Karawatha in a minute, which is about 1,000 hectares of preserved forest. 2 million hectares of forest were burnt in New South Wales just recently. 2 million hectares. It's astonishing. It's just absolutely astonishing. So we've got an ideological chasm when we face the global warming and the effects on all living beings. Now I have to say that Mother Koala and the Joey were actually rescued by caring humans. There was a recent report in the paper that they've survived, and the current plan is to release them back into the wild. Do you notice there might be a problem with that? It's certainly not the wild where they came from. So, yeah, interesting dilemma. So, I think with this divide that we have, with this chasm that we've created, I think we need to turn to listen to the Indigenous peoples of this place, to their stories of the land. Can we begin to re-inhabit and create different relationship to place? I think there are gifts in this place if we are willing to listen. There's the pragmatic and practical gift of knowing how to live sustainably. For example, Bruce Pascoe in Dark Emu has recently rewritten our understanding of Aboriginal agriculture along with ANU historian Bill Gamage, the biggest estate on earth. They show how Aboriginal peoples use fire and dams, cropping, to shape the landscape and farm it sustainably. There's so much to learn there, and until recently, this story was deliberately written out of our history. There's also the gift offered by Aboriginal storytellers and poets like Bill Neegi, who taught us how to relate differently to country, with an aesthetic based on feeling and kinship, and some of the beautiful words that he has there. Likewise, Miriam Rose Ungama Borman from the Daly River shares the practice of Dadiri with non-Indigenous Australians. She speaks of deep listening and quiet, still awareness. Miriam Rose explains, "When I experience Dadiri, I'm made whole again. I can sit on the riverbank or walk through the trees. Even if someone close to me has passed away, I can find my peace in this silent awareness. There is no need for words." I think it is this worldview and these sustainable, pragmatic practices and aesthetic sensibilities that could provide a way out of the terror. So I come to the second part of the talk today. Stories of enchantment and love. I want to share with you some of the place stories embedded in the forest reserve just south of here near Logan called Karawatha. These place stories provide a way of exploring how we might educate children to inhabit an Anthropocene with enchantment and love, a place story where we want to stay with the trouble. I heard these stories from Ron Tooth and his colleagues at PEAK, Pullen Vale Environmental Ed Centre, including Merrill and Carl and Harriet and Lucinda. I've called them place stories of love and enchantment because they are emotional, heartfelt, joyful, powerful stories that I'm sure will move you too. I want to convey how important it is to love the local, to remain engaged with the local and to make kin there, knowing too that the local is totally connected to myriad other places. Karawatha has been for millennia and continues to be sacred country to local Aboriginal people, and they continue to walk country and tell the stories embedded there. But in the last 200 years, it became a place of dispossession and grief. It's been used for timber getting, farming, is quarried for sandstone, which created a large waterhole after the aquifer was breached. In the 1980s, it was slated to become a housing estate on the edge of Brisbane to accommodate the growing population. At that time, on the boundary, what is now Karawatha, lived Bernice Volz, a local resident, a self-educated naturalist. Bernice is here today. I wonder if you would stand up, Bernice. No? Yes. Thanks very much for coming. Bernice does not seek the limelight, which is obvious, taking a while to stand up. So it's really wonderful that she made the effort to come. It is really a strange moment for me, telling the story of a person who's sitting in the audience. But anyway, that's the way it is. So here's the story. Bernice's neighbour Trish had developed a deep knowledge of Karawatha and one day took Bernice for a walk through the forest. Bernice was overwhelmed by its beauty and uniqueness, and they began to catalogue the flora and fauna, much of it endangered and at risk. They came to understand its complexity and fragility. They loved Karawatha. During periods of heavy rain, the lagoons in the forest filled with 24 frog species calling. Fungi spread underground and across fallen logs. Glossy black cockatoos might be heard, although they are much less common now. Spending time in these ecological niches of Karawatha strengthened the bonds between Bernice and place. She came to love Karawatha, and it loved her back, revealing the beauty and lithe rhythms of the more than human beings that lived there. This love led to action. She formed a committee and began lobbying both Logan and Brisbane councils and the state government to set aside the remnants of the once expansive forest system for future generations to experience. The timing was right. A range of political and social forces intersected so that money was set aside from a Brisbane City Council bushland levy and money from the state government to buy back portions of forest that was already in private ownership. Even the Gateway motorway was redirected to become the western boundary of this, and the state government provided money to purchase the extra land. So you can see a bend in the road there. That was actual a bend in the road that was kind of brought about by this group that wanted to save Karawatha. Bernice's activist story, her love of Karawatha, is about building relationships with community members and stakeholders and engaging decision makers about Karawatha. It's talking to everyone, as Bernice says. This type of activism is time-consuming and it requires long-term persistence and care. Children prepare for their experience of the Karawatha forest by learning about Bernice's story, a story of love and activism embedded in the very existence of Karawatha. The children's experience of Karawatha is also mediated by recognition of Aboriginal ongoing custodianship and the practice of Dadidi, gifted to Ron and his colleagues at Peak by Miriam Rose, pictured here with Merrill, who often leads the Karawatha program. And she also spent time with Miriam Rose at the Daly River. Ron and his colleagues at Peak want children to relate to the more than human world in loving, caring ways, and like Bill Neegi and Miriam Rose, see themselves in solidarity with the living systems of Karawatha as kin rather than as separate entities. Through this Dadiri-inspired place pedagogy, they are emotionally drawn into a new relationship with Karawatha, a new dance. These representations of the more than human world show that they have moved beyond a view of the world as inert and separate to a relational and emotional view. The children express an entangled sense of connectedness to the more than human world. They sense a different relationship to place based on the ontological and aesthetic stance expressed by Bill Neegi. I feel this with my body, with my blood, feeling all these trees, all this country. There is also a changing understanding of hope, not a vague abstract feeling, but an embodied practice and action. I learned that a whole group of people can save a forest. Here's another story, David's story. So these words and drawings are from David. He was described by his teacher as a capable but disengaged student at school. But something changed at Karawatha. They danced together, David and Karawatha. They produced a feeling for the sacred. As the comments by David to Merrill show, he was inspired and he wants to inspire others. We interpret David's experience as enchantment. I sometimes use the Vgotskian term perishivanye, but I'm using enchantment today. We'd interpret David's experience as enchantment with Karawatha that continued to influence him later. Here's another one that comes from a different program, the Bugs program that's run at Pullenvale. This is Leon's place story of enchantment, of vibrancy from the Bugs program. So the story is that Harriet was down in the bug garden with a group of students, and Harriet noticed that a bee was flying around Leon. It landed on his hand. He was shocked and flinched. Bob, a confident student, told Leon it was a native bee. Harriet reassured Leon, they don't sting. Leon let the bee crawl over his hand for around 4 minutes, watching it silently, intently. He started to smile and he laughed and laughed towards the end. I think it likes me. So this is just one moment, but I went back a week later and I asked Leon, do you remember anything about the Bugs program? He said, yeah, a bee landed on me. He'd been a very reluctant participant in the Bugs program. He'd been bitten by mosquitoes just after he arrived. He didn't want to go to the bug garden. But after the encounter with the bee, he became enthusiastic. He wanted to linger in the bug garden. And now, a week later, he assured me that he is 80% not scared of insects. I love the quantitative precision of his non-fear. Put your hand up. What level of terror are you at now? 80% or not 80%? But it's interesting, we found that a number of the children are actually quantifying their emotions, which you might think about the metrification of everyday life. So now is the time when our guests are going to come down and present their work on the bug garden. So if Reshma and Lucy could come down now.
So good afternoon. My name is Harriet and I'm a teacher at Pullenvale Environmental Centre, and I'm also an EIT, an entomologist in training. I'm also a research assistant to this project with Peter today. I feel really honoured to be introducing you to these wonderful young people, these EITs, Lucy and Reshma, who'll be sharing their own story of positive action for the environment in their own place and within their own school community. Reshma and Lucy are co-researchers with us on this project, and they've been on a journey as an entomologist in training. The big idea of being an EIT is investigating arthropods in your local place and the vital role that bugs play in maintaining the health of our planet. EITs take positive action to ensure the survival of bugs and their habitats by sharing their knowledge and passion with others. It is a ripple effect between self, others, and place that can begin with a moment of enchantment, with a tiny, beautiful being, a bug. So I spoke with Lucy, who wanted to share this photo of herself at Peak, doing her EIT fieldwork. Yep. So this is Lucy doing the capture and release activity in which they captured a crab spider. The EITs and the peak teacher, you called it? The ghost spider. From the outside looking in, these EITs were fully embodying enchantment. They were completely captivated by this spider, and I watched their facial expressions change from a bit of fear and uncertainty to joy and love and awe to this tiny arachnid. Lucy was talking about its 8 tiny eyes, its little pedipalps and its legs, and it seemed at that moment we were all connected with the more than human world together as EITs. And I thought the moment had finished there with the spider. But when I visited Lucy and Reshma back at school, a week later, the moment was recounted by Lucy with such detail that I knew the moment had not ended at peak in the bugs garden. It had a profound impact on these EITs. We had a long discussion about the ghost spider and other arthropods and the right they have to live without purposeful human intervention. Lucy and Reshma spoke of the need to respect bugs and their role in a balanced ecosystem, and even the scary ones like certain spiders. So this led me to ask them what they might do differently now as EITs in their own school community. This is where Reshma, passionately, came up with the idea of creating a bug club. So I don't want to speak on behalf of them. I'd like them to share their story with you about why they're creating this bug club. And this story is all from their words. So please warmly welcome these wonderful young EITs.
Hi, my name is Reshma. I go to Mogul State School and I am an entomologist in training.
Hi, my name is Lucy. I also go to Mogul State School and I am an entomologist in training with Reshma.
We are also co-researchers on this project. Our journey as EITs and co-researchers led us to this idea of creating a bug garden and club at our school. We are really excited to be here today to share our project that we are working on with you. Our journey as EITs started back at school when we signed up to the 3-year ARC project and started learning about insects and entomology. We started to feel intrigued, fascinated, and our brains were growing with knowledge. Before I went to Peak, I was careless about bugs because I didn't know how important they are.
Finally, it was time to visit Peak. We did fieldwork as EITs such as reading a tree, leaf detectives, and capture and release. This fieldwork helped us grow knowledge about how important bugs are and our care for these beautiful little creatures. In capture and release, I caught a ghost spider. The second I looked at it, I was so intrigued because I had never seen a spider in this way. I wouldn't have ever thought about the idea of catching a spider before I actually did at Peak. I released the spider because, as we learned, we always release the bug that you catch so it can keep living.
On the bus back to school from Peak, I was thinking about all these brilliant ideas we could do for the bugs. I felt like my brain was going to explode with information and ideas. A few days later, we came up with this brilliant idea of making a bug garden and bug club so we can teach younger students about how important bugs are to Mother Nature. Most people think about how bugs are bad, but you have to look at the good side. We thought it was important not only just for young students, but all students to remember this. This plan for our bug club was based on the activities we did at Peak, where our fascination about bugs became real. So it all started with an idea, and now it has evolved to a real project. We knew it was important to ask a teacher for help to help us manage and organize the club. At our school, Chappie Nikki is building a veggie garden and runs the gardening club. The veggie garden needed a bit of a makeover. Chappie has started to recreate the patch where we will put more effort in to try and make it healthy again, not only for insects, but for everyone. We asked Chappie's permission to use the garden for the club. He was very happy to support us. Mary asked if Chappie Nikki, who is sitting at the back right side of the theatre, please, if she can stand up and please give a wave.
We are aiming to start the Bug Club around the start of next year, where there will be activities such as reading a tree, capture and release, leaf detectives, and plant observations. Some of these activities came from our journey as EITs at Peak. When we are ready to start the club, we are going to talk to our principal for permission to go on the school assembly to share our idea to our school to get them involved. The children can come for a test day to the club to see if they like it. We have already started planning the equipment we need, and we are starting to collect second-hand jars as bug catchers. We are trying to find some second-hand resources as equipment for the club. Where to from here? The bug club planning is all working out at the moment, but we know there will be certain problems we have to try and fix. It is our responsibility to do this, as we don't want to put the adults helping us under so much pressure. We also know if we don't take care of the plant and soil, the bugs will not come. We aim to increase the population of bugs in our local area.
For 2 years, we are running our bug club. We want to try and find trustworthy and loyal students who we can hand the bug club over when we go to leave for high school. We want to keep this plan going on because if more students decide to join, then we can expand the club. When the students go to our club and learn information about bugs, they will be prepared for Peak, so when they go on their journey, EIT journey too. I have changed with my feelings towards bugs, and I feel that this club will help others to decrease their fear of insects and increase their care for bugs like it did with me.
Knowledge leads to care that leads to love for bugs.
We thank Peter for inviting us here to this lecture. We think it's a big opportunity and a proud moment for us in our life.
Now, with all this knowledge we have shared with you about who an EIT is and what they do, would you like to be an EIT too?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, that was great. I intended just to tell that story, and then about a week ago I thought, why don't we invite them in to do it themselves? One of the things that I really felt was powerful about that was how they decided to do it. You know, it was like really their choice, but also the sense of the politics of the situation. So they said at one point, we have to find a good teacher. We have to find somebody in this space who we can work with. And I think sort of Benice's spirit is flowing through them, you know, that kind of activist who starts to think about how are we going to make this happen in this place. I think the second thing that struck me was that sense of continuity. I mean, they're not just thinking about, oh, we're going to have a bit of fun making a bug club. They're actually thinking about how do we sustain this into the future? How do we bring the next generation in? So I think a wonderful example for us all. Okay, so we come to the final part of the Radford, which is around this notion of act now. So we know this is the time of urgency. We know that something has to happen. The time scale is small. Something has to happen. We have to act. I don't know, maybe we could all just walk around with signs. Act now. But it's too serious to joke about. Okay. That's interesting. So one of the things that was written recently was by Tim Flannery in the lead up to the last climate strike. And he was saying that no climate report or warning or political agreement or technological innovation has altered the ever upward trajectory of carbon pollution. The simple fact forces me to look back on my 20 years of climate activism as a colossal failure. The new and carefully planned rebellion by the young generation forces us earlier generations of climate activists to re-examine our strategy. Should we continue to use words to win the debate, or should we become climate rebels? So, this is the situation we're in at the moment. What are we going to do? So, you look at the activity of Greta. One person in August 2018, 6 million people in September 2019. She's provided the inspiration for young and old people around the world to take action. Part of Greta's power is her youth, her clarity, her determination and her whiteness being part of the global north. Though this has not spared her the derision of conservative commentators who have mocked her youth and her identification as a person with Asperger's syndrome. But we need to acknowledge other activists who have been unacknowledged, including the Seed Mob, who are joining young people across the world trying to do what our generation has failed to achieve, as Tim Flannery noted. So Greta expressed in crystal clear terms at the UN, 495 words, the exact carbon equation we are playing with and who is accountable. It's us. Greta's climate strike, Fridays for the Future, and its spread worldwide has challenged educators and systems of education in unprecedented ways, and the responses have been largely disappointing. When one school leader in Brisbane was telephoned just before the strike and asked, well, what's your policy on students or staff going on the strike? Said, what's this got to do with us? It seemed totally absurd to him. So this type of response fits with the political agenda for quiet Australians who are trusting and compliant. You can see some of the typical responses from departments of education, Catholic schools. In Queensland, Minister Grace said student protests should take place outside of school hours. Some of you might have remembered Minister Matt Canavan's comment. The best thing you'll learn about going to a protest is how to join the dole queue, not actually taking charge of your life and getting a real job. And the Prime Minister, I don't want our children to have anxieties about these issues. We've got to let kids be kids. So I think these are just avoiding the issue. Like, is this just go on? Like, is just go on as normal? It's a normal school day. We've got 10 years to do something about it. The systems don't want to face up to it. They don't want to do anything different. We stay at school and we learn 21st century skills. Eh? Exactly. Have you taken a look at those 21st century skills? I mean, I don't see anything in those 21st century skills that are likely to address what's happening to us, what needs to change. I don't know, it's a terrible moment. We know we have to change. We're sitting here, we're telling kids, just go to school. Just learn, just keep learning there. But if you think about what they could have learned on that march, the kinds of sense of solidarity, taking over the public space, getting a sense of power, getting a sense of influence, being with others, that would have been much more educational. So I don't know, I mean, we all of us face this particular dilemma at the moment. And I have to say, it's not that easy. So I ran a a Blackboard discussion site on whether students in my course would support the strike and go on strike. Some did, some said, well, they'd have a strike at school. And one person who was in a rural community, I think with mining areas, said, like, most of the people in this community don't even believe climate change is happening. So how can I participate in something like that? So there are real problems, there are real dilemmas that people face. So I'm not saying it's simple, but something has to change. So this is actually from one of the students in that course that I was just mentioning. She wrote back to me saying she was warned. She's the coordinator of her school's environmental group, and when the first student strike occurred, I received a firm warning from my school leadership team that I was not to encourage students to leave the school. So I quietly encouraged my students to become educated in the politics of the issue, and some of them went on the school strike anyway. Every form of advertising in school and social media is manipulating these kids, and every day, by helping them to engage in these social and political agendas using their feet, we can help them to authentically engage in society, and so on. So she says after they went on that school strike, they changed their sense of who they were. Some of them changed their preferences for university. Some of them decided to travel and volunteer. Now, that might be a naive idea about how to address climate change, but nonetheless, it's something they had in mind to do different. And some of them just went grassroots and started to look after the waterways. And so she says this is authentic learning, and I think I agree entirely with her. We need to open these spaces where activism is part of education, where people get active, and there are hard dialogues to be had about that, because everybody's not going to agree. I love this one. This was on the march. So this activist teacher had found loopholes in the current system. She's at local state school with some of her class. She found a justification in the current Australian curriculum to challenge the neutral chair type of education that is compliance-driven and oriented to maintaining the status quo. I don't know what conversation occurred at school, but the title of her sign, "My Students Are Here Today," I think is testament to her determination to act, even if it wasn't approved. In effect, through her restorying of the Australian curriculum, she's calling for curriculum change, not rewriting the official curriculum, but actually appropriating it to pursue a more activist and life-affirming pedagogy. Her students are experiencing rich learning, complex, multifaceted learning. No doubt they had to convince their parents to be allowed to march. I wonder how that went down. What influence are they having in their family? Activism is a site for difficult but generative dialogue about important social issues. That's why we need it now. In the Carnival of the March, they are learning what Donna Haraway has called a way of thinking that is not futurist, hopeful, but rather of the present, heartful, experiencing the here and now as a thick, complex tangle of times and places and emotions in which cultivating responsibilities, capacities to respond matters. This type of life-responsive curriculum is something that Lou Zippen and Murray Brennan have been writing about recently, researching how students can become co-researchers on issues that matter to them. I find the term they use, glitches in the local, to be a generative idea in terms of identifying issues that matter in students' lives, while also addressing how local experiences and concerns are connected to other communities and contexts. Local glitches are very often widespread experiences of people in other places. For example, Mari emailed me recently to list some of the glitches that students wanted to address, including fires and floods, climate change, and climate change deniers. These are common concerns in the Anthropocene, though likely to be experienced differently in different locations. Drawing upon the place stories I've recounted today and that Reshma and Lucy have reported to you, I want to conclude by proposing that for living justice in the Anthropocene, we need different forms and types of activism. When do we want it? Now. Exactly. As educators, we need to support young people in their political activism, writing to ministers, developing petitions and proposals for change, and actually protesting when the opportunity arises. This may require taking advantage of loopholes and generative spaces for action that can be found within the curriculum, even as it stands now, as revealed by that local teacher with the sign. We need to support Reshma and Lucy's plans, student-led action and voice to change the local and plan for its longevity. An honours student of mine this year, Kirsty Jackson, who I think's here at the moment, did her research project on getting rid of plastic out of children's lunchboxes. That was very interesting because a very simple thing like that opened up a space for some difficult dialogues at home, because the way that parents buy food in the supermarket is generally packaged in plastic, and particularly for kids' lunches. So even just opening up that little space had this reverberation back into the home. And Kirsty found that the grandparents and parents of the children that she met came up and said, "Oh yeah, we're really careful now about what we're buying. We're changing our buying practices." So these little attempts by us to change everyday practices in ways that are responsive to this moment, I think can open up bigger social change. I think we need a pedagogy for enchantment, a pedagogy for moments of love and connection, where students can experience kinship, as Bill Niji has taught us. What if we shifted from a focus and obsession with evidence-based practice, which looks backwards, to pedagogies that, let's face it, are really failing us in the piracy, to enchantment-based practice, looking forward to an Anthropocene based on kinship? I really think we need to really think, why are we going ahead with all of these labels and practices that come from an ideology that's produced this moment? Surely we cannot go on like this. PISA results are just out. Australia's results continue to slide. What's going to happen? We're going to get more of the same. It's going to be intensified. Surely this is not the way forward. Now, I haven't developed a full understanding of my proposal. Those particular words occurred to me today. But they're good ones. They are really good ones. I mean, it's not that I haven't thought about it. And as a little aside, Perishivanya as a concept, emotional moments, memorable emotional moments that comes from Vygotsky. I think that leads to this notion of changing our kind of dull, boring approach to education to thinking about it as really emotional moments, engaging moments, things that matter. So, yeah, but I think a pedagogy for enchantment is something we need. So we need staying with the trouble, love, care and solidarity over time, commitment as embodied by Bernice. I think schools provide a site where commitment to the local can in fact be practical and sustained. Now, I'm just reminded of Maruka State School. Vicky Hine, the principal there, has done an amazing job in connecting with her local community. She started a community garden in her school. She's changed what was a kind of place where kids were not allowed to go because there were trees there they might climb. She's changed that into a place where the kids have those trees to climb, but they have put in the soft landing stuff underneath. And they've also got some ribbons around branches you're not supposed to go beyond. But they've created the school as a place that children can explore, where they can be in touch with the more than human world. But I think schools, because they go on, because they relate to the local year after year after year, are places where that kind of bonding can occur. We've got to love the local. I think this is a powerful reason to get up in the morning, knowing that if you love the local, it will love you back, as Bernice experienced, as Leon and David, and Reshma and Lucy. And Donna Haraway has written, "It's actually not all that hard to sustain joy if we let ourselves. Joy is not innocence, it's openness to caring. If we let the pleasure in, if we let the light in, if we let it seep in, there's a kind of leaking of bling, the vibrancy of the world. Really, we live on an astonishing planet, and we may as well just let the astonishment in." And I think Sarah is equal to Donna Haraway. Sarah, 11-year-old, Brisbane, 2013. Have you changed after Karawatha? Well, this is a bit weird, but inside of my body used to be dark and focused on one thing at a time. When I used to write, like for English and stuff, it would be just boring, and I wouldn't use the same sort of expression and passion that I do now. Because now inside, where it used to be all dark and nothing special about it, it's sort of got these green leaves and it's just twirling around. And so I think I've grown more exciting and passionate and not so dull and blank that as I was before. And so I think that this has helped improve everything. I think this young student has felt the bling. And I leave you to enjoy her vision of her inside as twirling with green shoots. May your own composting and thinking and feeling be so vibrant. What do we want? Climate justice. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Climate justice. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Climate justice. When do we want it? Now. Okay, go out there and act. Thank you.